Mayday, Pakistan 8303.
When the pilot uttered these words, the passenger aircraft was only 600 feet above Karachi. Due to the scorching heat in Karachi, Pakistan's largest city, everyone was indoors. It was 2:35 p.m., and no one knew that within moments an emergency situation was about to unfold in Karachi. This was because the pilot of Pakistan International Airlines flight PK 8303 had issued a Mayday distress signal, indicating that the pilot was helpless and that the aircraft was now out of control. Just seconds after this signal, Karachi was shaken by a loud explosion, and the sky was covered in a thick black smoke. The Airbus A320 crashed into a densely populated residential area, just 430 meters from the airport. Surprisingly, the investigation report stated that there was no fault in the plane. So, how did this accident happen? What was the communication between the pilot and the traffic controller? Why and how did the first landing attempt at this airport fail just minutes earlier? What secrets were revealed in the investigation that lasted for 3 years? Welcome again to a video by Fusion Arc, viewers. On May 22, 2020, Flight 8303 was scheduled to take off from Lahore at 1 p.m., and its destination was Karachi International Airport. This was a short flight that was supposed to land at its destination in about 1 hour and 45 minutes. At that time, COVID lockdowns were at their peak, leading to very few flights. However, it was also the month of Ramadan, and Eid holidays were approaching. Fewer flights and more passengers meant that the flight was fully packed, with 91 passengers and 8 crew members on board. On this day, the weather was perfect, both in Lahore and Karachi. The flight captain was 58-year-old Sajjad Gul, who had been with Pakistan International Airlines for 24 years and had 18,000 hours of flying experience. The first officer was 33-year-old Usman Azam, who had been with PIA for 10 years. This was a 16-year-old Airbus A320 aircraft equipped with 2 CFM56 turbofan engines, both of which played a significant role in this story. The aircraft was in perfect condition and was being maintained according to Airbus recommendations. After completing all preparations at Lahore Airport, the plane took off at 1:05 p.m., with only a 5-minute delay. Shortly after, Flight 8303 reached an altitude of 34,000 feet, known as cruising altitude, where it was supposed to remain for the next 45 minutes. Upon reaching cruising altitude, the cabin crew offered snacks to both pilots, but they declined because they were fasting. During the cruise, the pilot engaged the autopilot and started chatting. At 1:20 p.m., the plane was crossing Nawabshah and was then connected to Karachi Control Tower, ending the responsibility of the previous control tower. Karachi Control welcomed the pilot and directed him to head straight to Makli. Normally, planes on this route reach Nawabshah and confirm with Karachi Tower which route they should take. There are several routes from Nawabshah to Karachi, including Nawabshah 2A, Nawabshah 2B, and Nawabshah 1C. The 2A route passes near Hyderabad and then turns right near Kinja Lake, going straight to Karachi Airport. The 2B route comes directly from Nawabshah to Karachi and takes a left at Makli, 28 kilometers or 15 nautical miles before the airport, aligning with the runway and then turning right again. The third route, 1C, goes directly from Nawabshah to Makli. These routes are recorded in the flight computer, so whichever route is assigned from Nawabshah, the pilot saves it in their flight computer, and the autopilot automatically adjusts altitude and speed. Here is the crucial point. Initially, PK 8303 was assigned the Nawabshah 2A route, which is a longer route. However, upon the pilot's insistence, they were allowed to go directly to Makli since it was during the pandemic, and there wasn't much air traffic. The controller permitted him to reach Makli directly. However, the pilot's mistake was not saving this shortcut in the flight management computer, which still assumed the Nawabshah 2A route was selected, while they were actually coming via 1C. At Nawabshah, the plane was at an altitude of 34,000 feet, and it was supposed to be at 7,000 feet by the time it reached Makli, 28 kilometers before Karachi Airport. Obviously, the plane cannot descend from 34,000 feet to 7,000 feet immediately, so it must gradually descend between Nawabshah and Makli. If the route is long, the descent is gradual. If the route is short, the descent must be faster. Since the flight computer had the 2A route selected, it was reducing altitude at 1,000 feet per minute, while the pilot was on the 1C route, which required a faster descent. This led to the plane being at 10,000 feet at Mackley when it should have been at 7,000 feet. When Karachi Control noticed the excessive altitude of PK 8303 on radar, they asked the pilot if he could land safely or if he would orbit at Mackley to reduce altitude. The captain replied, "No, we will manage," and refused to orbit. At this point, both pilots were unaware that the route saved in the computer was different from the one they were actually following. The information was in front of them, but they did not pay attention to it. After Mackley, the plane's nose was lowered to descend rapidly at 2,400 feet per minute. The plane's speed also increased due to the nose-down position. Seconds later, the plane was 21 kilometers from the runway, and its altitude, which was 10,000 feet earlier, had now dropped to 6,000 feet. However, according to the rules, the altitude should have been 3,000 feet at this point. Meanwhile, the controller tried to contact the captain several times, but the flight data recorder indicated that the pilot had mistakenly changed the radio frequency. When contact with the captain could not be established, the controller communicated with him through the emergency frequency and informed him that he was at 6,000 feet while he should be at 3,000 feet. They were again instructed to orbit to reduce speed and altitude, but the captain refused, saying, "We are established on the runway, we will manage." At this moment, the captain told the first officer, "See, after landing, these people will be surprised." This conversation was recorded on the cockpit voice recorder and heard by the Karachi controller. The controller again instructed him to orbit, but the captain refused for the third time. At this point, the captain realized his mistake. The flight computer had the 2A route selected, while they had come via 1C. He was heard saying, "Oh, what happened? Stop, hold, stop," at which point the first officer disengaged his hold and handed full control to the captain. Remember, until this point, the first officer was flying the plane, while the captain's responsibility was to oversee everything. The captain did not realize that the first officer had not deployed the landing gear. PK 8303 was descending rapidly, and at one point, its speed exceeded 650 km per hour, triggering warning alarms. As they approached the ground, another alarm sounded due to the retracted landing gear. The first officer, now frightened, suggested taking an orbit to control speed and altitude, but the captain insisted on his plan. As they neared the runway, multiple alarms were sounding, including one for the landing gear. In this confusion, the plane was landed on the runway without deploying the landing gear. The aircraft touched the runway 4 times in 16 seconds, causing violent shakes in the cabin, and both engines scraped the runway, leading to an oil leak. The captain, already confused by the alarms, realized his mistake, but by then, the first officer shouted, "Sir, take off, sir, take off." In a panic, the captain obeyed, and the plane was airborne again. Experts believe that the plane should have been left on the runway, as the worst that could happen was an engine fire, but at least it would be near the airport emergency services, which could have contained the fire. However, the captain did not do this. After taking off again, he realized that one engine had failed due to scraping the runway, and now the plane was flying on a single engine, which was also in poor condition due to oil leaks from both engines. Now, at an altitude of 3,000 feet, they attempted to go around to return to the runway. The control tower informed them that all runways were clear and that they could land on any of them. Meanwhile, the remaining engine started vibrating, and shortly after, it shut down as well. The plane, now without any engines, was circling toward the runway, rapidly losing altitude. This time, the captain deployed the landing gear much earlier, causing drag and reducing speed, the very speed they needed most at that moment. At 600 feet altitude, they aligned with the runway, but the captain realized they would not reach the runway. At that moment, he issued the Mayday call. "Mayday, Mayday, Pakistan 8303. Just seconds later, at 2:25 p.m., PK 8303 crashed over houses in Model Colony, just 1,340 meters short of the runway. The explosion from the crash was heard for miles, and black smoke began to rise into the sky. Remarkably, 2 people out of the 99 passengers and crew survived the crash. They were seated in the emergency exit row. During the investigation, authorities questioned whether the engines were faulty, but they were found to be functioning normally. Instead, a 3-year inquiry revealed that the accident resulted from a series of errors by the pilot, including the decision to take a shorter route without adjusting the flight computer and multiple refusals to follow control tower instructions. The inquiry also highlighted issues like insufficient training and systemic flaws within the airline. This tragic accident serves as a stark reminder of the importance of following protocols and the potential consequences when human error overrides technology and established procedures. Thank you for watching this video by Fusion Arc. If you found it informative, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analyses.